We acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land.
As one of the oldest living cultures on Earth, we celebrate their age-old connections to country, along with the knowledge, determination, patience and generosity of all First Nations people, past and present.
This is Aboriginal land. Trigger warning, this episode contains themes of violence and sexual abuse. If this is not something that is for your ears right now, we encourage you to step away and visit another episode instead.
Hi, I'm Lucille McCart.
And I'm Chantelle Otten. We're from Bumble and this is Give Me a Buzz.
From first dates to heartbreak, everyone can relate to the ups and downs of modern dating and relationships.
And we're here to give you the inspiration, motivation, and education to navigate any dating fairy tale or dilemma you may find yourself in.
So, Shanti, today we are joined by activist, writer, educator, co-founder of Not One More Nikki, Tarang Chawla. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
We're both really excited to have you here.
I'm really excited to be here.
So we ask every guest the same questions when we start an episode. And the first one is, what is your opening move?
Okay, I've been raking my brain about this, right? Because it's like if I'm on a dating app, if I'm on Bumble, then, you know, obviously I've got like the opening move as a question. I can respond to a prompt or ask my own. If it's in person, like I remember when I was a lot younger, it'd be like, you know, I'd go straight into like wanting to have a dance or a cigarette or like share something, right? Like share an experience of some sort.
Sharing a ciggy, classic.
Yeah.
I want to know what the dance move is. Like, how do you like dance up to someone?
I think I grew up like, I don't know, it's maybe showing my age a little bit. I grew up like watching a lot of like Michael Jackson video clips, right? So I'd like be in the lounge room like copying like what he was doing on screen. And so like whenever like you'd be at a party or something and there's like a little circle happening,
You're
right?
like, what's this?
Yeah. And I'm like, no one wanted to talk to me, right? But for those like 5 minutes at the I felt like a god,
Killing
right?
it.
So that was
Yeah.
like my opening move. But like I think, you know, on an app, for me it's like I loathe small talk. You know, when they're like, how are you? How's your day?
Don't care. I don't really care how your day was. Don't know you. You're a stranger.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really bad at small talk.
Yeah.
I'm a DM galley.
Yeah. Medium talk or above, like only. And so for me, like so if I'm like on an app or something, I want to get to know the person. So I'm like straight into like, what conspiracy theory do you think is true, right? Or like who's the actor that would, or actress or whatever that would play you in the movie of your life, right? I want to get right into getting to know who they are, what they think, what makes them tick, right? Like what's the last thing you bought that you could never imagine life without, right? Because we're living in a capitalist society. I just want to know stuff about the other person.
Can you answer that?
The last thing I bought that I can't imagine life without. I buy a lot of shit I don't need. Is what is now occurring to me.
Yeah.
Maybe my air fryer.
Amazing.
I bought that for you.
Yeah. It was a gift. It was a beautiful gift.
Love that.
Right?
That was a great choice by me. What about you?
I think for me as well, it might be gifts that I bought other people. Let me explain.
Yes.
I bought my mum like a mosaic of Frida Kahlo. Now, it's not mine. It hangs on the lounge room wall of my parents. But whenever I see how happy it makes her, it takes me back to that moment. And so I get to relive that fulfillment over and over again. So it's not I can't live without it, but the feeling it gave me is something that like takes me back to a positive point in my life.
I'll change my answer then because I was my niece's, it's not actually my niece, it's my best friend's daughter.
Yeah.
It was her 3rd birthday party on the weekend, and I bought her from New York a frozen snow globe that lights up and plays music.
Amazing.
And the look on her face was
priceless.
Like, cost me like $30 on Amazon or something.
Yeah.
And it was a lifetime of
Yeah.
Yeah, she just loves that. She just skips up and down. What would we talk about if we were to ask what the worst dating advice you've ever received was?
Oh, there's just too many, right? There's
so
too
much
many to
bad
start,
advice
right?
out there,
And I
isn't
guess like being from a South Asian background, right? There's a lot of like, you know, ethnic and cultural stereotypes that come up. And I was like sort of reflecting on how the experience is, particularly for women, right? I'm trying to have empathy for like South Asian women in the dating world. And even for young men in like hetero like relationships, there was this thing of like, you just don't date. Like,
Yes.
it's like until you get to a certain age, it's like life follows like an order. Like you go to school, you finish school, you go to uni or TAFE, or you do some kind of study. You build your life up first, right? And then you date.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not the way the world works, right? It might have worked in the olden days, right? But it doesn't work now. It's really limiting. Like, people don't understand like healthy relationships. They don't understand how to interact. It breeds like intergenerational issues with communication and trauma. So that kind of
people end up hiding their dating
Yeah.
a lot of the time. I
Yeah.
know, because I
That's true.
have worked with our Bumble team in India a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you hear is, especially for women, is you go through your schooling being
Yep.
told don't date, don't meet boys,
Yep.
don't do anything.
Yep.
And then as soon as that is over, it's like, now it's time to get married.
Yep.
And these people either have no experience with the opposite sex or dating, but all of a sudden the pressure is on to like get married, or they've been hiding something or like having to sneak around, and that breeds like
yeah.
bad vibes. So
Yeah.
it's really challenging.
I really struggle with that growing up because, like, I had this kind of mentality where, and I think, I don't even know where it started, but I feel like I was wired that way, where I had to be open and honest with my parents from a very young age. And a lot of other South Asian kids, I was also a kid at the time, weren't as open and honest. And it created this really difficult dynamic where they would like ostracize me because it was like,
You might tell your parents.
you might tell your parents. And I was like, dude, they know you're not at the library on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
Like, they know
Yeah.
no one is at the library.
No
on, yeah, no disrespect to
Is the
people at
library open?
Yeah, it's like,
And
I
if
don't
you
even think
are,
it's open.
sorry
yeah.
to hear.
You know, bookworms, there's someone out there for you
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
But like, it just, it really bugged me the wrong way. And then there was some of the cliches, you know, like stuff that was like super toxic, where it was like, keep things secret if it means keeping them. Someone told me that once.
Oh, that's
Nice.
terrible
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah. And it was
Oh,
like,
wow.
no, that's not, be your authentic self.
Yeah.
No. And to be clear, all cultures lie to their parents.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
That is universal.
Yeah.
But I think in that specific community, it is quite specific to
Yeah,
dating.
there's reasons
Yeah.
like why,
Yeah.
and that doesn't like justify them, just helps explain why they're kind of
Yeah.
there. The other ones, like one thing that I've always hated in terms of like dating advice is being told that like, or like hearing this being said to someone was, he's only mean to you because he likes you.
Oh,
Ew.
That was such a big one growing up.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, why do parents tell that to their kids? Like, I remember my mum telling me, oh, he pushed you. Oh, he must like you.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
That was never something in my household. No one's allowed to be mean to you. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to actually be like, no, I don't accept that behavior.
Like, is
Yeah.
it something that we tell little girls so that they won't get upset that someone was mean to them? Because it just breeds
Yeah.
such a toxic belief that it's okay to be
think-
mistreated.
I think it's about not understanding, and we speak about boundaries a lot on this podcast. I never grew up learning boundaries. We were like, we had such big problems with boundaries in my household, and that's not in a negative way. It was just never really taught. And as an adult, I've gone so hard on learning boundaries to the point where like, I've had to soften a little bit because I am also a Dutch girl. So my boundaries are very direct. They're like, no, I don't want to. That's fine for me. But
Right.
in Australia, it's a little bit like, huh? Like people get a little bit like,
Yeah. Kind of have to massage a little bit,
To
or like,
work
you know,
around it.
add a sweetener or something.
Yeah.
like that.
absolutely, you know,
Yeah.
love you, but I don't feel like doing that today.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
I think if you're telling girls and women from age 4 up
Yeah.
that a boy, man, guy, whatever you want to term
Yeah.
you want to use, being rude to you
Yeah.
or mean to you
Yeah.
or disrespecting you is okay.
Yep.
You don't stop hearing that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, why did you put up with
Yeah.
that? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, culture and society has been telling me that
Yeah.
that must mean he loves me
Yeah.
since I could understand.
it's just gaslighting
Yeah.
from an early age.
I think it
isn't
might be younger though, because
Yeah.
you said 4 and up, and I'm just thinking of like 3-year-old kinder,
Yeah.
right? And they're
Yeah.
already like interacting among, you know, sexes and genders. So if you got like a little boy and he like pushes a girl or something, and at that age, it is innocuous and innocent because
It's not
the
gendered.
boy
at that
doesn't
age.
know
Yeah,
what
they don't know what a girl
he's
versus-
doing, but it's all the kind of commentary around it towards the boy, towards the girl, that
Yeah.
then starts that conditioning process.
I always find it weird, like even with some of my friends' kids when they're like, "Oh, does she have a boyfriend? Does she have that's a baby."
Yeah.
Why are we like projecting onto them this weird gender romantic kind of stuff that isn't real? It's very
Absolutely.
odd.
Yeah, I've always thought that's odd, right? And then there's one about like, say you go on a date and then they're like, say it goes well, and then it's like, oh, wait a certain amount of time, because that will show that you're keen or not too keen. And I've never understood that stuff. I've always just been like, hey, like if you're into them, then just be into them, and if they're not into you, then respect that. Respect that.
Yeah.
It's a very clear boundary, and have that. Try to have that open and honest and vulnerable communication.
Yeah, and I think that's a tricky one as well, because there's so much conflicting advice where it's like you hear, oh, don't contact them for 3 days, or like don't do this, don't be too keen. But then it's also like, if they like you, you'll know. Well, what if they're following some stupid rule that they're not meant to contact me for 3 days?
Yeah.
Like, which is true,
Or they're like neurodiverse. Sometimes people will display things in a particular way that might not align to your expectations of what interest looks like. And so there's no kind of substitute for actually communicating. And that might not be like spoken. It might be like over text or something. Some people prefer texting over phone calls or other types of conversation. So it's just like, it's a minefield, but at the end of the day, it's like communication.
I find if he wanted to, he would, to be like some of the most toxic advice, because it is kind of ableist, like you said. Like, I dated a guy who was severely ADHD, and there were some days where I didn't hear from him because it was physically incapable of communicating that day.
Right.
And like, that relationship didn't work out for other reasons.
Yeah.
But it's not always true that not every man is this alpha male who's going to be like chasing the girl and full of confidence and sweep you off your feet and run into the sunset with you. Like, we have to allow for like other narratives to exist as well.
And how boring and bland is that, right? That kind of like Hollywood trope, Sometimes neurospicy, it's more interesting.
More fun.
Yeah.
More fun for sure.
Well, we've been talking about that a little bit because my friends recently, as I mentioned to you before, my mum recently passed away, and I have about like 450 unread text messages because I'm ADHD, and if you want to grab my attention, you have to FaceTime me because I don't answer phone calls because I'll be on them and then I'll be like, and I'll just get distracted. I'll be like, I'm so sorry. And it just ends up zapping my energy.
And I'm so sorry, Chantelle, for your loss. Like, while you're, grieving, and that'll be a lifelong thing, it'll just take different forms. But while you're in the immediate phases of it and the current phases of it, it's like sometimes it's just cues from the other person's environment, like comfortable silence, where it's just like, you're there. We're connected.
Yeah.
This relationship is currently working. I don't just mean romantic, but this relationship is currently fulfilling my needs because you're just there.
Totally. And it's about just sharing a space, not actually always having to share your emotions or like, how are you really going? And you're like, I just want to be here with you right now. That's all I need. I just need support. Let's just hang.
You want to be like alone together. Because otherwise, like, you don't want to be lonely.
No.
Right? No one wants. I don't think anyone wants to be lonely. But you don't need all that intensity of like someone trying to fix it for you.
Totally. Okay, let's keep going because we have so much to get through today, and I'm excited about it. So we talk a lot about safety. We've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but picking the right person for you and spotting red flags early on, it's become a lot more work these days to differentiate between beige flags, even green flags, but red flags especially, especially when everything kind of feels either fluid or micro or kind of like there's a lot going on in the world. So like these little things, do we have capacity to pick up on them? What are some smaller red flags or traits of maybe narcissism or danger that we tend to miss or look over when it comes to dating?
Oh, look, it's a minefield, right? There's so many things, and particularly for women, I'm conscious of one thing, which is that as a man, it's like, I think there are enough men giving advice to women in the world that, like, as a man, it's not my job to say, oh, this is what you should be doing, women, this is not what you should be doing, right? Because it's kind of like that idea of like men saying that they need to protect women. And it's like, well, statistically, a man is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a woman.
Protect me from who?
So, protect me from whom, right? I'm kind of, at times, recalcitrant or reluctant to be like, this is the advice. But
Give us the advice.
I was
At the
asked. I
same
was
time,
asked.
you
Thank you.
Right?
We asked
You
the
have
I was
question.
free
asked.
reign here.
And so for me, there's one of the ones is like that love bombing, right? You know, when we talk about narcissism, and particularly in like coercive, controlling environments, right, where a relationship, you know, where someone is using a pattern of behavior to like take away the control of another person, right, through like diminishing their sense of self. The love bombing is one of the things at the start where it's just like they're almost too good to be true. You know, they're like showing up at your work with flowers, or they're sending you like 100 texts a day telling you how much they adore you, and you've only met like a week ago or like even like 3 days ago.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really challenging about it is that's the way Hollywood depicts a lot of romantic love between women and men, right? It's like that chasing mentality, right? And so one of the things I would say is to trust your gut, right? Like if something feels a bit slightly wrong, trust your gut that, hey, this could be a sign of something else. See how you go with testing boundaries, right? Like kind of go, hey, I understand that you like me. I'm into you as well. But when you do whatever the behavior is, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable. I'm not sure if that's your intention. And if they take that as like, oh, I'm so sorry, like I'm just into you, I'll back off. It's like, oh, great, tick. Like this person understands me and what makes me like feel connected or sexy or loved or valued. But if they're like, oh, that's weird, you know, or, you know, other
I'm
girls.
just trying to show you that I love you.
Yeah, or this is what gentlemen do. Like maybe you've never been loved by like a real man. They say some stupid thing like that.
They'll
It's
out
like,
themselves. The reason that love bombing is so effective is because I think the average heterosexual cisgender man isn't even remotely putting in that much effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it feels like such a dream of like, oh my God, everything that I have wanted to hear someone is saying to me. But you have to remember that like you can control the pace. Like the pace at which a relationship moves is both people have to participate in that. But also there's this trend on TikTok of like saying no to small things. So like if you say you like olives, he orders olives and then say you don't want one. You know, if you, like just say no to like, I could never. But
Hang on, red flag. I said I didn't want an olive.
And so you say no to like small, simple things.
Yeah.
Just to sort of test the response
Temperament.
to that.
Yeah.
And if they're like, okay, cool, I'll eat the olives.
Yeah.
Or if they're like, you know, they're shoving an olive down your throat.
Yeah.
You know, it's a safer way to kind of see what someone's response and boundary is like rather than pushing them on something big where you might not feel comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's such great advice, right? Like testing the waters with small boundaries, right? And it's not about the other person. It's about what you're comfortable with or what you like or what you want. And one of the things that I found so intriguing is about how people choose to spend their time. You know, it's like, particularly with women when they're like, oh, I'm going to catch up with my girlfriends. And some men get really uncomfortable about that. And it's like, dude, that's on you. Like, what are you uncomfortable about? Like, or if there are other issues around trust in your relationship, then you both need to have a conversation around that, because that's really what's at the core of that, you know?
Or if you're dating a man or a woman who is uncomfortable with you being with your friends and expresses any sort of discomfort with the fact that you might talk to your friends about them, that's a huge red flag, because they know that they're exhibiting some sort of toxic behavior and they're aware that your friends might be pointing that out to you.
Yeah, I think
definitely.
it's just like a safety feeling as well. Like I think safety is the most important feeling you should have in a relationship. And as soon as you're starting to feel like that's being compromised, you have to assess, where is this coming from? Is this a past thing that I'm feeling? Am I projecting? Or is this, you know, am I actually being triggered for a relevant reason?
Yeah.
And I need to really assess that.
And especially psychological safety. Like I think for the men listening, sometimes we kind of think that like safety for women is that women aren't safe if they go for a run, or women aren't safe in their homes in abusive relationships, or women aren't safe in particular environments because of a risk to physical safety. But it's like that feeling of psychological safety, which allows for like intimacy.
Emotional
right?
safety.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is so important, because it's like that's often the precursor to some of the other forms of harm.
What we didn't talk about at the start is how you got into this line of work. and your sister Nikki. I don't know if you want to talk about.
Sure, yeah. So my sister Nikki, we've been talking about safety and stuff. She had her life stolen from her when she was 23. She was trying to, break up, end a relationship with a man, and she lived with like abusive, controlling behaviours, and she'd never reported, at least to the authorities, any kind of family violence. But when she tried to leave, he stabbed her 35 times. And yeah, it's kind of one of the most, I've said it, when I do public speaking, is that one of the most important pieces of paper I'll ever sign in my life is the one that had to identify what was left of her. Because after that kind of horrific violence, there's not much of a human. You just kind of go off what's in front of you. It's just awful that we are living in the last year, we've had a woman being killed every 4 days by a man in Australia. And it's like, one of the things that kind of shocks me about this is how easy it is for the collective to kind of go, it's a problem over there. Like, we look at other parts of the world and we go, they're disrespectful towards women. Or, when Trump was elected, we had a lot of people looking at the US and going like, they don't care about women's rights and equality, and, or they have racism. And it's like, hang on a minute. What about like our country's treatment of First Nations people? Colonization was 200 and a bit years ago. That's like 4 grandmas ago, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that many generations, right? It kind of just shocks me that we're so ready to just go, it's an over there problem, rather than something that we want to help solve here.
Yeah.
Which I also think is like one of the most masculine things men can do, right, if they're very traditional in their values, is care about their community, care about safety of women, not in a weirdly like protective, chauvinistic way, but in like a, hey, I would want every woman and girl to be free from violence and to live a life where she can realize her dreams and just be whatever she wants to be. And I think that's like actually a pretty traditional value.
Yeah. And I want this community to be the safe space that anyone can go to, any minority group.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way.
Course.
That's absolutely horrific. And I'm so sorry for you and your family.
No, thank you.
And very grateful that you've also put so much... that amount of pain that you have to go through, and then also to relive that every time you tell her story and to help others with that, I think that's absolutely phenomenal.
No, thank you. I think it's one of those things, right, though, where like in a weird way, like it is a part of like your own healing, and also like I don't want other people to go through that, right? And as I was just saying, like, a woman every 4 days, and I've met, Nikki was killed 10 years ago, and I've met probably hundreds of families, I'm going to say at this point. And like, you just see in their eyes, like, that there's a part of them that died. And so I think very early on, I was like, can't let that happen to me. Cannot let that happen to me and my family. And so part of why I chose to do what I do now was a way to protect myself as well.
Yeah. It is a hard thing though, because when I experienced grief, and mine was with a friend, every time I heard about anyone dying for like 6 months after that, I had this like visceral reaction. How do you like cope with that now? Does that happen to you? Yeah,
probably. I mean, I don't know. Like, you get, it sounds really awful to say, but you get a bit desensitized, right? Which is not a good thing, right? It's actually probably a response to so much trauma, is that you're just like, happened again. I think sometimes I get really angry, not about the acts itself, but about everyone around, that are kind of like, so for example, I'm pretty angry often at the Australian media and the way that it reports, or like, even beyond like international media. In the Australian context, sometimes I feel like we live in a country that like the bar for men is so low sometimes in this country, I reckon, for what like the idea of what a good man is, right? Because a man will like sexually assault a woman and newspapers will still refer to him as being like a good man, right? Like, we had a convicted felon, right, become the president of the United States for the second time. And this is not about his policies. This is not about whether you see eye to eye on the economy or immigration or anything. This is just the fact that he has been found credibly by judges, whatever we think of the legal system, by judges to have like actually, assaulted and committed some pretty horrible crimes. Yeah. And so like that tells survivors, victims, their families, the community, that like maybe women's lives don't matter all that much, and that there aren't like ramifications or consequences for really, really harmful male behavior. And that's scary to me. So for me, like, you get a bit desensitized to it, and I get more angry about like the media responses, and I just think sometimes the bar for what the idea of being a good man is so low, and I feel like men would benefit if we elevated that, right? Like, it's not that I think it's better for women. I think it's better for men and people of all genders.
Not having raped someone is not a good thing.
Yeah.
Like it is a good thing, but it's not.
That shouldn't be the highlight.
Expectation
that shouldn't be the
you
highlight.
Have never, we shouldn't be upholding people of like, he's not done the bad thing.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing that's
I
a
guess
good
he's
thing?
not a la 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 la.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really quite wild, isn't it? I think that also comes like down to men who identify themselves as like feminists. They're like, I support women, I'm a feminist. They're screaming it from the rooftops. How can you actually, like, I don't know, figure out who is being performative and who is an actual feminist these days?
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard, right? And like, when you're asking me this question, Chantelle, like my socials, I often talk about issues around feminism and equality, right? So I don't think I could say, for example, if he's posting on socials about it, that, you know, you have to check whether or not he's a real feminist. Because it's like, I post on socials about it. I guess for the men in like, you know, in your interactions with other people in real life, is hold yourself accountable, right, to like what you say you believe, right? Because it's really easy, I reckon, to just go, I have these beliefs, this is what I care about, I'm a feminist, but then go, but I want, you know, if I'm in a relationship, I'd want the wife, you know, or the woman to stay at home and look after the kids, right? And it's like, why? Like, you know, like, why is that? You know, interrogate that. And then also, I think one thing I'm really kind of conscious of is how many people now, and men in particular, are maybe weaponizing feminism, or at least weaponizing therapy speak. You know, like I think of that Jonah Hill example where it was like, dude, that's not what boundaries mean.
Yeah, that's
like,
not what those words mean.
Boundaries are not controlling the other person's behavior. They're about what you won't accept, right? Because of your value system, right? What you're saying is using the word boundary, but then putting limits on her, right?
To create rules for someone else to
follow.
Yeah.
And if you're not comfortable with something, then just say it. Hey, I'm not comfortable with that, and therefore I'm going to bow out of this relationship. And you know what? If that makes people think you're weak or effeminate or whatever, so be it. But at least, like, you know, you're open about your insecurities, you're open about your vulnerabilities, you're open about the fact that you get jealous sometimes. Yeah. Right?
I think that in every type of relationship, romantic, platonic, professional, family, everyone can benefit from more direct communication in that style, because I think there's so many examples that I could name just that I've had in the last month of my life where people just don't come out and say what their problem is, or what they're worried about, or what they're anxious about, or what they're feeling frustrated with. And instead they'll start talking about something else, or expect you to connect the dots for them. And it's like you said, if you said, I'm feeling insecure about the male relationships that you had, either I'm going to bow out or let's talk about it. But in order to do that, you have to be in touch with your own self-awareness, your own reality.
And I think for a lot of boys, I think for a lot of boys and men, there's like an entire generation that have never had these skills around emotional literacy and vulnerability, right? And I even think about my own experiences growing up. Like, there were like 4 emotions that I felt, you know, as a boy. It was like, you felt happy, you felt sad, you felt angry, or you felt really angry. Like, that you didn't have like, and under that you didn't have like shame or embarrassment or guilt. Like, you didn't really get to the core of
it's like
what
the primary
was going
colors
on.
of emotion.
And there's always something underlying like one of those emotions. I even think about like jealousy in relationships is such an interesting thing, because it's like jealousy itself, you know,
it's a healthy emotion.
It happens. It's like anger is an emotion. It's not a response, right? People often are like, oh, I got angry and then I lashed out. It's like they're two separate things.
Totally.
You know, like anger is valid, you know, like
we all get angry.
You're not wrong for getting angry. the lashing out or the outburst, that's the part you do have control of.
Yeah.
And anger usually is the emotion that's covering all the other emotions, like shame or insecurity or, you know, even
fear.
Fear is a huge thing. I also think for the femmes and the women who are listening, we are allowed to be angry, first and foremost. I think that's something that's really important to say. But also, you're allowed to also feel unsafe because society right now is not really safe. And I think this year has been a phenomenal example of like an unsafe society. And if we come back to like what we can do and what we can encourage, all genders, it is about calling out bad behaviour. And I think that if we talk about men's bad behaviour, it's so much easier to say, let's call that out. Especially, I don't know, I think like this year when we hear about the statistic of 4 women like a week getting, sorry.
One woman every 4 days.
One woman every 4 days, sorry, my brain.
Almost to a week, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I think I put up a poll earlier this year and I asked, I asked the women on my platform, have you actually been asked about how you feel about safety, how you feel about the statistics? I think it was like 90% had not been asked by a single man in their life.
How does this make you feel?
How does this make you feel?
Yeah.
Myself included.
Yeah.
I wasn't asked. And I thought like...
No one's ever asked me.
No. And it's really, really crazy. I have major issues around safety and I think also being in the public eye. And I've had some really bad problems in the past 2 years around safety, which has made me completely back off from being public facing.
Yeah.
And I think like the point is, how much more work do we have to do as women to encourage people around us to just check on us and ask, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do to make this better for you?
I think it comes back around to what we were talking about earlier, that men don't identify with the men that are perpetrating, and so therefore they don't associate the women in their life with women that could be potential victims or survivors of that kind of behaviour. And I think if you're a man that's listening, the simplest way to try and understand is just talk to the women in your life about their experiences. Be curious. The quickest way to like understand what women are trying to say is just ask them what their experiences have been like.
Mirror it back as well. So I hear that you feel unsafe when A, B, C, and D, and just be a really good active listener.
Yeah.
One of the common concerns with that is the generational gap. So the older generation, what's the point? Why, you know, they're never going to change. Why do we keep having to explain to them? I can see that in some circumstances, but in others like safety, I think it's important to keep talking about things. But for others who have more of that, I don't know if it's stoic or it's dismissive or it's just, I don't want to hear about it, or they identify with it. What do we do there? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, it's one of those things. I really dislike how that idea of stoicism has been misrepresented, right? Because like
as strong,
right, and like brute.
Yes.
Right? Because I went and read like where it, you know, originated from, and it was like, no, Stoics were in touch with their emotions. It was just like the way you interacted with the world, right, was that you wouldn't allow like other things to impact you. Like you would try to think that like I have control over my responses to situations, but not like, you know, like I don't have control over the storm or the weather, but how I feel about it and choose to feel about it, I have control over, right? Which is almost like the origins of like some psychology and cognitive behavioral stuff, where it's like how you choose to look at a situation, right? So I was like, firstly, some of the like misogynist grifters have misrepresented the idea, right, which I wasn't happy about. I also struggle with some of these ideas around like that it's purely generational, as though younger boys and men don't also have harmful views about girls and women. I think they just represent it differently. One of the best memes I ever saw around this issue was that younger generations have the same toxic masculinity as older generations, but none of the life skills. So when they punch drywall, they don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's true.
Yeah.
Right? That's like, I've seen that happen. Like I've seen, you know, men flip out, punch a wall, and then be like, oh, fuck, I don't know what to do now. I guess I'll call someone to fix it, as opposed to, you know, knowing how to fix it, right? I think one of the things that like...
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, one of the things that's like, I suppose, really useful is for men to do all that stuff that you talked about around listening to the experiences of women and asking open questions and giving space for them to answer, like not feeling that they need to interrupt or judge.
And I understand men's desire to be like, that's not me.
Yeah.
Because like
it's uncomfortable.
But also like as a white person, if I hear about experiences of racism, it feels important to be like, I don't think that way. Yeah. But you have to understand it's not helpful.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Trying so hard to prove that you're not something.
Yeah.
Doesn't make an ounce of difference to anyone.
I felt that way when Trump got elected, right? Because 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump, right? So when I saw this kind of idea that it was purely along solely gender lines or solely like, you know, particular lines, I was like, no, there's actually, what's so scary about this is that it's multifaceted. It's not purely just the war on women component. There's other aspects of the fact that, you know, Kamala's a black, South Asian, mixed race woman. Yeah. That factors in. So it just highlights how complex these things are, right? Yeah. And how we hear things that might trigger us or make us feel vulnerable. And I think, you know, I always kind of come back to this idea that every woman has an experience, either a lived experience or someone that they care about having been impacted by this particular issue, sexual violence, abuse, disrespect. And so few men know anyone that's ever perpetrated this. And I'm like, that's
the math doesn't add
up. The math in here is it. I think we covered a lot of ground.
We've gone way over time, but I could keep going for...
Yeah, we'll just have to have you back on next season.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been, I don't get the opportunity to be in environments like this often. So I'm really grateful to both of you for having me here.
Thank you. We're really grateful to you for coming.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, we're down to our DM. We've got one from Stephanie.
Hey guys, I'm self-aware enough to know I have some people-pleasing tendencies. How do I break out of the cycle when I'm dating?
Oh, sis. Yeah. It's a really tough one, and I think this is going to take some work, and it's going to take a little bit of, well, actually not a little bit, it's going to take a lot of reflection. Why do you feel like you need to have people-pleasing tendencies? Why do you struggle with honouring yourself before you please others?
100%.
Yeah. Where is that learned from as well? You know, is that something that you grew up believing that is what you had to
be like
to be liked?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That your needs are secondary. And I also think like the trouble with being a people pleaser is that most people pleasers aren't actually good at it because they're trying so hard to please everyone that they're not pleasing anyone, you know? And I think that the other characteristic that often comes with being a people pleaser is like indirect communication, you know? And it's like, just ask people what they want and you'll get to a clearer outcome. But also put yourself first. What do you want?
Absolutely,
you know?
Because like boundaries, as we've said, are more respectful for relationships and allow you to have enough energy for yourself to then be able to interact with others. If you're not putting yourself first and you're putting others first, you're going to be tired, you're going to be unwell, you're going to feel a little bit flat, if not pretty flat. You're going to be anxious as well because you're worrying about, am I doing good enough? Am I doing enough for others? And it's honestly, it's a bit of a disaster.
Yeah. If you're feeding everyone else before you feed yourself, you're going to be starving. 100%. And then when you come into any sort of interaction with that starving kind of energy, it's a recipe for disaster. Absolutely. Sort of food metaphors I just gave.
As they would say, you cannot pour from an empty cup.
But that's it, Stephanie. That's our advice.
That's our advice. But I just, I want to let you know that you are really, really important. And I really think it would be worth doing the work here so that you can get to a place where you feel like you don't have to please others in order to be liked. What an episode.
Great episode we've had.
I love Tarang. If you also love Tarang.
Where can we follow him? We can follow him at Tarang Chawla on Instagram. He has a podcast.
Yes, There Is No Place Like Home podcast, which you can find on all streaming platforms. And if you like us, you can send us a message at Bumble _Australia.
Then you can tap the bell. Then you can follow us everywhere that
We are possible to follow.
Yep.
Give us a review.
Share us with everyone.
Tell everyone you know.
And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.